What's going on, everybody? This is Afro Think Tank. Today we're going to learn a little bit of U.S. history, a little bit of government class. We're going to have government today. We're gonna have government. Okay. Today we're going to learn about the Homestead Act. Have you ever heard of that? The Homestead Act. I need all you continental and Caribbean Africans to pay attention to this video. I need all my African Americans who've never heard of the Homestead Act to pay attention to this video. I need all the white folks who are watching me to pay attention to this video, because the Homestead Act was the biggest welfare ever given to any group of people in mankind, and it has had reverberating effects on the American economy to this day. Okay, the Homestead Act. Now, for all you continental Africans and Caribbeans who, because you're a part of the upper class or because you're privileged in your countries, you left your country and you came to America, right? Because you were part of the upper percentile of your group and you came to America. And because of that, America gave you a visa and allowed you to come to America and thrive. For all of you who sit there on your high horses, because of some of you continental Africans are very uppity and you've been convinced that you are exceptional, but in fact, you only take less money for the same work that African Americans and European Americans who live in America have been doing and demand equal, if not better pay to go along with this economy that we live in. Okay, so I need you to pay attention. So whenever you hear a continental African talk trash about why African Americans are not where we're supposed to be, or why African Americans complain about institutionalized racism, and why it is you think that by you coming over here after 1960, reaping the benefits of all the hard work of African Americans had to put in order to combat or go around things like the Homestead Act, you will have a more of an appreciation for your African American brothers and sisters, and you won't repeat some of the ignorant things that you say. You understand? You have a more of an appreciation for the position African Americans find ourselves in, and you have a more of an appreciation for how, despite being put in those positions, we still manage to thrive. And as a ethnic group, which is African American, how we still manage to produce a GDP that's on par with most major superpowers. As African Americans, by themselves, with our own GDP, through our own hard work and labor, despite all the institutionalized obstacles placed upon us for centuries, despite us starting legitimately from the mud, not even on top of the mud, underneath the mud, we were used as bricks mixed with the mud to make the foundation of America. And somehow we managed to get to this position on the global scale. I need you to understand what it is that we have been fighting against. The Homestead Act. That's when a bunch of Europeans were given free land by the federal government. Yes, most of these Europeans that you see in America that's living in the middle class, upper class, a lot of them have these farms that are currently failing and being repurchased by non-governmental organizations and the federal government and friends. A lot of these people were giving welfare. These lands, they didn't lift themselves up from their bootstraps. All these Europeans that came over here about 100 years ago, even though African Americans have been here for 400 years, a solid 300 years before most of these white folks that you see here today are, got here. We already built it before even the white folks got here, right? They were given the biggest gift, something that Europeans were never given in their homeland, which is the peninsula of Eurasia. Okay, because it's not a continent. They still like to call it a continent. You don't meet the definition of continent. You barely meet the definition of a country. God damn it. And that's goddamn true. All right. But all these poor Europeans were giving something they have never been given before. A whole bunch of land. Land stolen from the Native Americans. And our 40 acres and a mule. The reason why we never got our 40 acres and a mule, which is owed to us retroactively with interest. That's what reparations is supposed to be for. Reason why we didn't get that? Because they decided to give all white people all the land they possibly can. Now, was it out the kindness of their heart, these rich white folk? No. It's because they need these poor white folk to get out in them fields, and they needed them to farm for the rich white folks. But nonetheless, they were given all this land, all this money, all this opportunity. It's a part of America that they act like never happened. That's why you have all these middle class white dudes running around in their F-150s, $80,000 Dodge Rams and F-150s and their nice ass houses, some of them in gated communities, because they were able to leverage all the thousands upon thousands of free unearned land that was just handed to them for free by the federal government in the West and the Midwest, while giving African Americans, the people who legitimately built the economies, financed and built all the structures, right? And financed all of America's foreign wars and expeditions. And currently to this day, the only reason America is at its height, even though it's coming down, is because of the backs of African people who were stolen and brought to the New World in the transatlantic slave trade. So everything about America, every single thing, every piece of America was built by the great African Americans who are West and Central Africans, who were brought over here to build what we already built in West Africa. And while we were building their white Wakandas, they was destroying and stealing our real Wakanda that we call Africa. Anyway, that's all I got to say. You guys tell me what you think in the comment section. It's Afro Think Tank. Learn something, teach them. I'm out.
The biggest government welfare program isn't food stamps, it isn't SNAP, it isn't Medicare, it isn't Medicaid, it isn't even Social Security. It's free land to white people. It was called the Homestead Act. Come, let's do our homework. What were the Homestead Acts? They were a series of acts from the federal government in the United States meant to encourage settlement of the plains areas and the Wild West, because we all know in Colonialism 101, the first step is to acquire land. The second step is to occupy it. So just because you made the Louisiana Purchase and you officially own all of this land, if your people aren't on it, then how is it really yours? This moment in American history is often romanticized in shows like Little House on the Prairie, Godless, Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman, and of course in favorite films like Dances with Wolves. Now, there were 4 major Homestead Acts. The first one was the Donation Land Claim Act of 1850. Now, this happened right after the United States got a lot of land from the Mexican-American War. The second one was the Homestead Act of 1862. This was right after the southern states seceded from the Union, and President Lincoln signed this act into law, encouraging people to settle land out west, particularly the Plains states. The Homestead Act of 1862 was responsible for the biggest expansion of settlement in the United States. Then, of course, we had the 40 acres and a mule deal of 1865, which was meant to be reparations, and interestingly enough, this is the only one that did not benefit white people, and it's the only one that was rescinded. Isn't that curious? Then, of course, you have the Southern Homestead Act of 1866, and we'll get into that in a minute. Now, the first one, the Donation Land Claim Act of 1850. It was meant to encourage people from the eastern United States to head west and settle this parcel of land up here called the Oregon Territory. It granted people 320 acres per person. And if you were a couple, it would give you up to 640 acres. It's a huge bit of land. It was offered to white settlers only, specifically. So if you were Black or Indigenous, you were not involved with this deal at all. And of course, one of the biggest downfalls of this was it encroached on native lands. So even though this territory was officially the United States at this point, nobody was out here. This was just the Wild West. So this was native tribes living their lives. And as white people started moving over from the east out to the west, taking over, encroaching on people that were already living there and didn't care if Spain sold land to the Americas on paper because that was their home. One thing it did allow finally was for women to be landowners, but it was repealed in 1855. Now in 1862, we have the Homestead Act. This, interestingly enough, was championed by Andrew Johnson when he was in the Senate. Then he came on to be Lincoln's vice president, and it was signed by Lincoln in 1862. It offered you 160 acres of land, free and clear, if you could improve it. So you had to live on the land, farm it, and stay there, improve it for 5 years. This is covered in Little House on the Prairie. That's what they were doing. It encouraged you to move to the plains states, sort of the middle of the country, and set up farms. It was meant to encourage the poor to middle class individual farm. But of course, most people couldn't even afford to get started because you needed gear, you needed a wagon, you needed horses, you needed a plow, you needed all of this stuff to even work the land and build a home. You needed lumber, you needed stuff, you needed support, infrastructure, and capital to get started. And of course, it became a hotbed for fraud. So all these poor people couldn't bother to get started. They just didn't even know how to approach any of this. It's like being dropped into the wilderness. It's like a game of Survivor. Okay, go. Most people couldn't pull it off. So what happened? Miners, mining companies, lumber companies, railroads came in and took advantage of this deal and set up shop. However, it was the greatest expansion of individual land ownership in this country, and it was mostly taken advantage of by white people. 93 million American citizens are considered direct descendants of homesteaders that are still alive today. That's almost 1 out of 3 American citizens are a beneficiary of this generational wealth that came from the practice of homesteading. Then, of course, is the 40 acres and a mule deal of 1865. It was never officially an act from Congress because it was rescinded by Andrew Johnson, the exact same guy that championed the Homestead Act of 1862. Suddenly, when it came to giving land to Black people, he killed it. Isn't that interesting? He intended to make it a law, but he was assassinated before he could, and it granted small plots of land on seized Confederate plantations here on the south shore of the eastern seaboard. This is prime real estate. This was a very specific bit of land that was included in the 40 acres and a mule deal. The plots were specifically marked for formerly enslaved people, and it was considered payment or reparations for the service of over 200,000 Black soldiers who fought for the Union to defeat the Confederacy. So this was a deal specifically just for Black people. White people need not apply. And it was the one that was killed. Finally, we have the Southern Homestead Act of 1866. This came after 40 acres and a mule was killed because we had a major problem in the American South with tenement farmers and sharecroppers. There was deep, deep poverty in the South after the Civil War. Now, this was signed by Johnson sort of in an attempt to replace the 40 acres and a mule, but of course, it included white people. It focused on land in the South here in Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, and a bit of Florida. It was for newly freed men and white people who fought for the Union, no Confederates. It was supposed to help bring people up out of poverty. There were 28,000 claims by white people and only 6,500 claims by newly freed Black people. Why? Well, because white Southerners sabotaged the program. They didn't even tell people that it existed. If you're a plantation owner and you've got these newly freed, formerly enslaved people working your land for peanuts, pennies on the dollar, these poor sharecroppers are trapped, are you really going to tell them, hey, there's free land over in Mississippi, why don't you leave me and go start your own farm? No, of course not. They didn't even tell people the programs were happening. They were intimidating people, harassing people, unaliving people, making their lives completely miserable, and sabotage this program for the newly freed sharecroppers that were trapped in this cycle of poverty. It was deliberate. This wasn't even the prime real estate, the good farming land, the beautiful land along the coast. This was swamps and bayous and forests. If you're a poor sharecropper, what do you know about clearing forests and building infrastructure to even get you into some of these places? So the Southern Homestead Act of 1866 was wildly unsuccessful. It disproportionately helped white people and not Black people. It was too little too late for reparations, and it was destroyed by racist white Southerners who made it their business to ruin this program and keep Black people in the cycle of poverty. So the Homestead Acts contributed to this period in American expansion that we always romanticize, the California Gold Rush and the pioneers and Little House on a Prairie and all that stuff. But honestly, it was a dark moment in American history. It was a huge welfare program that disproportionately helped white people instead of the people who truly needed help. It displaced Native people and was not nearly as glamorous as we're led to believe. The people who did succeed literally made huts out of mud and manure. And the Homestead Acts had repercussions for generations. If your family is given 640 acres of prime real estate, that is generational wealth for you and the people that come after you. 93 million Americans are still benefiting from that. So we have this narrative of pick yourself up by the bootstraps, but it's a hell of a lot easier if you're given a free pair of boots.
In this conversation, in case you've just tuned in. That said, before news, traffic, and sports, Professor Darity, you were dropping some other knowledge on us about an act in this country where 45 million living white Americans are still benefiting from that. Take me back and explain that to me and the audience, please.
So I was referring to the Homestead Act of 1862, which was a mechanism that the federal government used to distribute land that was taken from the Native American population and turned it over essentially to white Americans, both folks who were already citizens as well as people who had newly arrived as immigrants. I was pointing out that the land was distributed in 160-acre lots to 1.5 million white families, which would amount to approximately 10% of the white population in the year 1900. And that this had ramifications to the present moment because of the ways in which people transmit wealth across generations, so that there are now an estimated 45 million white Americans who continue to be beneficiaries of those land patents. What I wanted to go on and say is that in the 20th century, the federal government moved away from asset building via land distribution to asset building by promoting home ownership. And it did that both through the New Deal legislation and the GI Bill that was supposed to provide benefits to returning veterans from World War II. However, it also did it in such a way that it promoted black wealth. It promoted white wealth accumulation and did not promote black wealth accumulation. And this is because under the New Deal, the Federal Housing Administration set up a public-private partnership with local banks that resulted in the use of redlining as a mechanism for denying home ownership credits to black households. And then under the GI Bill, the home ownership subsidy provisions were denied black returning veterans at an extraordinarily high rate and given to white returning veterans almost on a 100% basis.
I didn't want to interrupt for 1 second. I wanted you to get that out, and I'm glad you did, because now I want to ask the following, which is how then black folk should hear white fellow citizens when they say that I didn't benefit from anything that my ancestors did, so why should I be stuck paying a bill for reparations or for any racial equity initiative for that matter? How should we hear that retort?
Well, we should hear that retort as a mistake, and hopefully, at best, a consequence of ignorance on the part of the individuals who issue it, because they're not recognizing that there was a host of federal policies that indeed did benefit their ancestors, fairly close ancestors, where we start talking about the GI Bill in particular, and that those shaped the economic security and opportunity that they have in the present moment in a way that was denied to black Americans.
America wasn't founded by grabbing a bunch of dudes from other countries, bringing them here, giving them free apartments and welfare. It was by people who wanted to escape religious persecution, and they started building things, not just coming here getting handouts. I mean, I've been a lot of places and I've seen a lot of people, and as soon as the truth is told and you don't like it, you just say racist.
Let's talk about the truth here, Pierce. I got to jump in here. When we talk about the founding of America, it was founded by European colonizers, built on the backs of enslaved Africans and on the genocide of indigenous people. To claim that it wasn't, it literally was. The Homestead Act, which was finally repealed in 1987, gave hundreds of millions of acres of free land to white European immigrants while denying them to the descendants of enslaved Africans. And so even to this day, the single demographic, the largest demographic on public welfare are white Americans. But there is no accountability and restitution or reparations for the enslaved Africans and their descendants who suffered genocide. And we rewrite this history. Well, we built it by our bootstraps. No, you didn't. You built it on the backs of enslaved Africans who were beaten and murdered and raped. This is a legacy of this country.
To be prejudiced against black people and call them lazy requires the highest level of ignorance conceivable. White people, when they came to this land, were the laziest welfare babies you could ever imagine. Got everything from their king. Brown people helped them survive the winter. Then they got black slaves to keep them alive and make them an economic superpower. And now they look at those black people as if we're lazy. No, we're the reason you're rich. We're the reason you're rich. It's not by your hard work. You're not a hard worker. Historically, ancestors receive welfare and now you receive welfare. And somehow you can look at black people and blame us for our situation. No, it's your fault.
Free Sudan! Boycott diamonds and gold! Free Sudan! Boycott diamonds and gold! We most definitely cannot forget about the people of Sudan.
Thanks for watching Afro Think Tank. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And follow me on Substack and Patreon for more content. Remember, it's Pan-Africanism or nothing.